Do use true stops. What are true stops? There are three values of your camera that manages your photo's exposure. The first one is ISO. Second one, the shutter speed. And the third one, the aperture. Now, why should we be using true stop? Simple. A human eye can only perceive difference in brightness if one of the subject is brighter than the other by 2 times. Anything less than 2 times, you need to put them side by side to be able to compare them. So if you take a look at this, A is brighter than B, but it is only noticeable if A is 2 times or more brighter than B. If A is just slightly brighter than B, not even 2 times, you won't be able to tell the difference. So with that in mind, let's learn true stops. Now let's use the ISO to learn the true stop. Everybody knows that the ISO is used to control the sensitivity of your sensor. So if you look at your camera's ISO, you would have ISO of 100, 125, 160, 200, 250, 320, 400, and so on and so forth. But with all these numbers, which ISO should you use and which one of these are true stops? Simple. ISO 100 is a true stop. Times that with 2, ISO 200 is also a true stop. And so is ISO 400, 800, 1600, 3200, so on and so forth. So if you look at all these numbers, these are cleanly divisible by 2. And as a photographer shooting professionally, you're choosing your ISO first. You should always choose these beautiful numbers. Avoid using ISO like 125 or 640. The simple reason is it's hard to calculate. By using the true stop, you'll be able to times 2 or divide by 2, and by doing that, you can change the perceivable brightness of your sensor. Now when it comes to the true stops of the aperture, it gets trickier. Let's start with the first series. f1 is a true stop. Take f1, times it with 2, f2 is also a true stop. f4, f8, and f16. This is the first series. But you notice that some of the true stops are not in here. That brings us to the second series. Start with f1.4. That's a true stop. Times that with 2, f2.8, also a true stop. And then we have f5.6, f11, and finally f22. So if you look at these 2 rows, these are true stop. So when you put them all together, these represent the true stops that you should be using. So as a photographer, I would strongly advise you to choose a beautiful true stop for your aperture before you start shooting. Don't use f7.1 or f6.3. These are not beautiful numbers. So most experienced photographers would take a peek at your EXIF info. Make sure that your ISO is a true stop. And make sure that your aperture is also a true stop. If your shutter speed is not a true stop, we fully understand, because you sometimes use your shutter speed to get your exposure to 0 on the exposure meter. Avoid using all these weird F number. These are non-true stops. Use these numbers, make them look like you didn't go to photography school. Ouch. Oh hey, do use the lowest possible ISO and the highest possible shutter speed combination when you shoot a photo. Take a look at this picture. We can clearly tell the subject is not moving. But if you look at the EXIF info, you realize that the shutter speed is way too high, well, the guy may be fast asleep, but that doesn't mean that he's fast. So why the need to shoot at such a high shutter speed? So if you look at this, you can tell that the photographer made a choice of using an ISO too high, and because the ISO is too high, the sensor is too sensitive and too bright, he ended up using a high shutter speed. So here's the thing, bring down the ISO value. It's a bright sunny day. So I presume that he can use an ISO of maybe 400. And by bringing down the ISO 400, you can easily calculate now that you're making the sensor darker by 2 stops. And that is why you can now bring down the shutter speed from 1/1000, 2 stops down, 1/500, 1 more stop down, 1/250. This would be a better choice to shoot a photo of a man that is fast asleep